Good morning. Welcome to the 4th International Conference ILIS. My name is Giuseppe Maiello. I'm working here in Prague in the University of Finance and Administration, and just want to say how we started some years ago, why we are here now. Because the International Lab of
Innovative Social Research.
Thank you. It's an institution which was born in Salerno, in southern Italy, with connection with the University of Naples, Federico II. And this was originally, I was seeing this institution as from Prague, and I start to come, as many of you are sitting here or you are online. But last year, when we have the 3rd international conference, our chancellor, the chancellor of our university, who speaks very, very good Italian, had a speech there. And we decided with Giuseppe Masullo to organize the next conference here in Prague. So it means that ILIS went out after 3 years. Let's not forget that 2 years were very hard because of the COVID, you know, of the pandemics. So we decided to have this conference abroad in a hybrid form. Because we are working quite well in this format. On the other side, we like some people are here today. Many young people I see because they wanted to see Prague. They wanted to join coffee breaks, this situation, classical situation of the conference, to meet each other. To understand this, we have no support from nobody. On the other side, of course, we have the support of the university as a guest, that we have this atmosphere here, the techniques we are using there. But the other things are we are not supported. We had to organize this conference here in Prague was not so easy, because we have two cultures, the Southern Italian culture and the Czech Central European culture, two way of organizing the stuff. And I was in the middle. It was a very interesting experience for me as an anthropologist to study two staff, two secretaries working, and I was in the middle. Yes, interesting, and also I suffered a little bit. But it seems that it's going quite well now. They are registered in more than 100 people, and 100 colleagues from 13 different countries. My first thanks are for the chancellor of the University of Finance and Administration, Bohuslava Schenkirova, which today is not here because after Tomislav Potocký, we'll say why. A special thanks to Lucie Finova, which is the chef of the international department of the University of Administration. So to Marianna Coppola, who coordinated the secretary in Salerno. I read all the abstract. I will not make a summary now because it's too early, I think, to make a summary. I think we are going to work in these 2 days, and maybe we will have time sometimes tomorrow at the conclusions. We have, after these greetings, after this introduction, we have 4 special guests. We have Professor Amaturo from University of Federico II Naples, Stefanizzi, University of Vysoká in Milan, Claudia, Santi and Daniele Solvi from University of Campania, Luigi Vanvitelli, and Professor Anthony Giddens, that we are seeing now on the screen directly from London. Thank you, Professor Giddens, to be with us. It's a great honor for all of us. They are free. Their speech are free. We want for them to to have an abstract, to have a study, because their authority is so high. We just want to listen to them, and that's why you don't find them in the book of abstract. After lunch, we will have standard sections. Evening dinner. Here there is also a QR code. Maybe you can ask the secretary for this QR code, and we have a chat that, in the case you lose yourself in Prague, this is a chat for all of us. We are in Prague. I know for many of you it's the first time here in Prague. Tomorrow, that you are here in Prague, we organize the visit of the town, and after we will have the conclusion. But tomorrow in the morning, those of you who are online, we will continue in our work. At this moment, for my side, that's all. Welcome to the 4th International Conference ILIS. Thank you very much. And I think I can give you. Please Tomislav Potocký, if can give some greetings from our chancellor. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you all, whether you are here in person or you are with us online. My name is Tomislav Potocký. I work at the University of Finance and Administration as a Vice Dean for Pedagogical Issues at the Faculty of Economical Studies. And on behalf of Director Mrs. Bohuslava Šenkyřová, I would like to warmly welcome you here in Prague. Our rector truly regrets not being here, as she has to participate in a meet-up of rectors of Czech universities today, though she's delighted that our university can host the on-site part of the 3rd annual conference, Rethinking Social Theories and Methods in a Digital Society. So I would like to express my sincere hope that, that this conference will achieve its objective and provide an effective platform for academics to fruitfully theorize new realities of the digital era and comprehend new challenges to the human social life, which is being shaped by digital transformation and new media. I wish you a lot of inspiring ideas and successful networking, and of course, a pleasant stay here in Prague. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So now we have the chief of the International Lab for Innovative Social Research, Professor Giuseppe Masullo from University of Salerno. Peppe, you can start your speech.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this conference of the International Lab for Innovative Social Research here in Prague. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Giuseppe Masullo, Associate Professor of General Sociology at the University of Salerno and coordinator, along with my colleague Felicia Deo and Angela Deli Paoli, of the ILIS network, and a fundamental contribution of our colleague Gabriella Punziano at the University of Naples. I would like to thank my colleague Giuseppe Maiello, who is hosting us at this prestigious university for the 40th International Conference entitled The Rethink Social Theories and Methods in a Digital Society. The University of Finance and Administration is a partner of ILIS network. We have already had numerous and exciting opportunities for collaboration. For example, last April we organized a week of excellent seminar meetings and lessons on digital methods. My presentation will address the following topics. Firstly, presentation of ILIS network, its aims, area of research and scientific initiatives. Secondly, a brief history of the network since its establishment, its achievement, and the research and ongoing initiatives. And finally, a description of the main publication that we have produced over the years. Let's start with the first point. The International Lab for Innovative Social Research is located at the Department of Humanities, Philosophy and Education, and it's an interdisciplinary center for the social research. The lab promotes the theoretical, epistemological and methodological advances in social science, enabling continuous exchange among national and international scholars. The lab promotes the theoretical, and epistemological methodological advances in the social science, and also what is the mission of the ILIS is in the slide is the scientific committee, and for the scientific point of view, the mission of ILIS, we aim to combine understanding the contemporary social processes with emerging trends in social research methods. New innovative approach have introduced alternative data collection and analysis method with new ways of representing information, as such as in the case of e-methods and big data analysis. Our lab also offers methodological service to the scientific community of the University of Salerno. We give support to the research, design, data collection, generation and storage, pretesting, questionnaire building, sampling, dataset creation, and data analysis. We have three main goals. The first is the scientific dissemination of innovative social theories and research practice through meeting, for example, lectio magistralis, seminars, workshops, and conferences, hosting prominent visiting scholars from around the world. The second is the design of project proposal in partnership with other international centers, submitting to the national and international finding sources for scientific research. And finally, the design and the implementation of the empirical research at an international level through the innovation of the methodological research. We have conducted research in many areas and shown on the slide, for example, social research methods, migration, gender and sexuality, etc. And also we promote several activities, for example, international exchange with foreign university aimed at hosting visiting professor in the field of social science, design a complex scientific research project, and finally empirical research on the main research stream of the ILIS. As you can see, we are promoting activities such as research design classes, method classes, technique and data analysis classes in the detail you can see on the slide. And for the history of our network, I'm here with my students. The earliest opportunity to test the network and the soundness of our approach come with the first international conference of the network held in Salerno in 2019, centered on ethnography research, both classical understood and applied to the digital environment, which today takes on various names, including that on ethnography. This initial opportunity for dialogue led us to focus our attention increasingly on the theme of digital research, which is obviously having a profound effect on traditional ways of theoretical and methodological framing. We explored this issue in the second conference titled Research Methods in the Digital Society, Challenge and Opportunities in 2020, and in the third conference titled Research Methods in the Digital Society, Area and Practice in 2021, by looking at various fields on which sociology has traditionally focused its attention, such as health, gender, sexuality, etc. We have now reached to the 40th ILIS conference, this year hosted by the prestigious University of Prague. This initiative is coordinated by our colleague Giuseppe Maiello, who has always been an active scholar and participant in numerous initiatives promoted by ILIS Network. In fact, this event followed a meeting we held last April, where again in Prague we met with a number of colleagues to discuss the upcoming challenge posed by the digital society, which induces us to review the traditional theoretical and methodological paradigms which we use to reflect sociologically on social phenomena. It's for a long time the digital has been a specific field of study of the sociological field. Today it's not possible to keep this dimension separate from the study of social reality, insofar as the pervasive diffusion of the new communication technology has modified our being in the world, our social relation, our opportunities, as well as having added structural limits unthinkable to the sociologists who gave birth to our discipline at the end of the 19th century. This led us to open a discussion of the resilience of certain concepts proposed by the classic of sociological thinking, and not only in a theoretical sense for a micro, and meso point of view, but also for a methodological point of view. Insofar it is necessary to rethink certain classical tools of sociological research, as well as to advising others in order to observe phenomena that unfold between the real and virtual, or they are unprecedented and typical of the digital. Thanks to the quality of the contents of the essay we have received at the feedback from this conference led to the following publication. The first one, Etnografia and Etnografia, edited by me and my colleague Felice Addeo and Angela Deli Paoli, and published with an Italian editor. The second one, two special publications in Italian Sociological Review, top class review in Italy. The first one dedicated to the conceptualization of social research in the digital era, edited by me and Felice Addeo, and the second one dedicated on digital social research, edited by me and Angela Deli Paoli. An important publication is a handbook of research and advanced research methodologies for a digital society, edited by Gabriella Punziano and my colleague Angela Deli Paoli. Two special publication between In Cultura e Studi del Sociale, scientific journal, Italian journal, dedicated to the digital research during COVID-19 pandemic, edited by me and Giuseppe Maiello, and another at the end, Exploring Everyday Digital Life, edited by Massimo Ragnedda. And another publication interesting is a special issue in Italian Journal of Sociology of Education of the titled of the impact of the digital on research in socialization and communication processes, and a special issues in cultural machine in 2022. Obviously, on this occasion, we don't have the time to go into this work in detail, but you can find more information online at www.labilis.org, where you can download some of this publication. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. So now I think we can we can switch. What time is it? It's exactly 9:59. It's exactly 10 o'clock. So it's not Italian time. It seems to be Czech time. So please, if Professor Amaturo is here, now I think she has, if she wants, 15 minutes. One thing, of course, in this part of our conference, we will be our guest. Our advice is to speak about 15 minutes. In the other part of the conference, I will ask to the chairs to be very intolerant. I mean, we are always, all of us, we are tolerant, but all the chairs, please be intolerant, because we have to finish at 7 o'clock this evening. So it's up to you, dear chairs, to be strict. But now I'm very glad to introduce you Professor Enrica Amaturo, University of Naples, Federico II. I come from Naples. I was born in Naples, but I'm living here 38 years. But I'm so glad to see colleagues and so important colleagues coming from my town where I was born. Thank you, Professor Amaturo. You are here. Please take your speech.
So good morning to everybody, and thanks for your invitation. I think that it's very, very important work that the ILIS network is going to do, because the problem of the digital, the matter of the digital is one of the most relevant problem that sociology is now facing. So thank you for your work. I prepared a little presentation. I intend to stay in the 15 minutes that you gave me, and I try to share my screen. Some consideration about the epistemology of the digital, the role of technology in social research methods. That's what I want to discuss with you. This is a very known thing that we usually say that methods as a dialect in between epistemology and technology, techniques. We used to say techniques, now we can say also between epistemology and technology. And this is a little scheme for the first epistemic consequences of the digital. The first two words recall in our mind what we said about the first phase of positivism, no? The theme of objectivity and the theme of induction. In this case, for objectivity, we intend that social reality is independent from technology and sociality. People now, a lot of people maintain that big data and platform are considered as windows on social reality. The same for induction, because they think that being able to track human behavior with unprecedented fidelity and precision, exploring existing data may be more useful than building models of why people behave the way they do. The third consequence is new because it regards computation. Some people, a lot of people, think that is efficient in provisioning social phenomena because of the possibility to transfer research result in the real world and its application to big databases. So this is the new thinking about the sociology and technology. In the analysis of epistemic consequences that the big data and computation have had on social sciences, the debate has been guided by the discussion about methodological innovation. This is an important opposition established, advocated by Rogers, between the new and traditional methods. He says that there are native digital methods and digitized methods, cioè methods that are already existing in analog form che was converted in digital. I think that this has been a big mistake, because this leads us to think that technology means new and social sciences are old or always the same things. There are two main limitations in this debate, because digital platform and devices use method was built upon established and enduring methodological principles. The relational between digital techniques and traditional social research made us unrecognized when it comes to natively digital methods, because the distinction between the digitized methods and natively digital methods present an opposition between the development of social research methods within a computational framework and a sociological framework. Okay, so there is a famous article of Savage and Burroughs that they contrast interviews and surveys with data mining and analysis of geolocated data. I maintain that the digital methods are both old and new, because the digital methods lead us to think in terms of an opposition between old and new, but I think that this dichotomy is too simplistic. I think that the question to move beyond the debate of innovation focus on what characterized the development of social research methods, because there is a methodological issue that is more important than innovation, and it concerns the role we want to assign to technology in the development of social research methods. Now I'm referring back to John Stuart Mills, because the emphasis of innovation can overshade the development of social research in digital context, which involve change in various aspect of our methodology, because we now have to reflect about the relationship between technology and sociology, the interplay between data, methods and theory, the dynamics between the object and subject of research, as well as the integration of different methodological approaches. In the sociological imagination, Mills argued that the increasing technological ethos within modern science could diminish the level of esteem traditionally accorded to the social sciences. This alarm was made 16 years after 60 years after the alarm. Now we can say it's going on the same things. And I think that the sociological imagination is still important for us in our reflection. Everybody says that he talk about abstracted empiricism, and I think that now we have the same problem in because the range of technique associated with the survey research has grown enormously. Another thing important to say, that we have to give a role to technology in social research methodology. Kitchen, as you know, spoke about the data revolution, introduced this term. Now, I think after 15 years, we can have a more mature view about the consequences of digital technologies on social research methodology. We have to consider the role on three specific epistemic questions: the dynamics between the object and subject of research, the interplay between data, methods, and theories, and the integration between different methodological approaches. So, just some consideration about the epistemology of the digital. I propose three terms. I, with people that work with me, in particular Biagio Aragona, but also Gabriella Punziano, because in Naples we have a group of people who work on these topics. The first term is intersubjectivity, the second is abduction, and the third is mixed methods. Intersubjectivity. I maintain here that social reality is dependent on the socio-technical activities that are made to grasp it. And data are not a simple reflection of work that truly produced. Nothing new in what I'm saying, but sometimes people forget about these things in analyzing the role of technology. The second is abduction, because the purpose of science is to generate theories about social reality, and the logical method employed is abductive, mixing induction and deduction. People who say that is the end of theory as really an insupportable fantasy. And the third thing I suggest is mixed methods, because guided computational method and traditional social research methods are both qualitative and quantitative, I wisely mixed. About intersubjective, two concepts that's important in our reflection on this topic: the concept of methodological dispositives and data assemblages, because we have to recall, they have always in our mind that are the material objects and ideas that configure the ways we do research. They are not simply research methods, but they are themselves object of analysis. They allow us to grasp social reality, but at the same time they configure social reality, and there is a continual dialect between methods and object. And the second important concept is data assemblage. It's introduced by Kitchen. Data assemblage are complex socio-technical systems composed of many apparatus and elements that are truly entwined, whose central concern is to the production of data. So data assemblages are made of two main activities: a technical process. We can recall operational definition, selection, data curation, which shape the data as it is, and a cultural process which shapes the background knowledge, belief, instruments, and other things that are shared in a scientific community, which enables the sharing of meanings. And researching the big data assemblage may help us to unpack the digital black boxes and increase our knowledge about the processes of algorithm construction, the effects of data curation on research results, and the values into digital data. There is a little draft to compare empiricism, neo-empiricism, and criticism, to introduce the term of the inference of explanation, abduction, that marks the passage to a distinction between rationalism and empiricism, to a synthesis that we can call criticism. No? So we are now data-informed, not data-driven. And the third concept is mixed methods. I think that is important for the epistemology of the digital, because they support methodological eclectism, provide a different overall interpretation, and help us to treat the digital simultaneously as a context, as an object, and as a research strategy. They help in detachment for triangulation and to move into innovative scope of integration. And this concept helps us to manage the rejection of the dualism and dichotomies, the new and traditional, and so on. It poses as an interactive and cyclical approach to research, back and forth between induction and abduction. So, what are my suggestions for the future? To remember the importance of methodological pluralism, and remember that many of the techniques that have been developed in our discipline are taken for other disciplines. Remember the scaling technique taken from psychology, la comparison from political sciences, biographical methods from history, etc. And we can do the same with digital techniques. Another point is the need for mutual adaptation and disadaptation between research techniques within an outside and digital context is very, very crucial. There are not absolutely good or bad techniques. There are not ready-to-use methods. It's important to configure digital methods in a way that is worthwhile for social research, and recognize the role of technology in social research does not imply that technology should drive social research. Another point is that the critical pragmatism of data sources is important for us. We don't have to reject new sources of information because they are unfamiliar, but we have to remember that we are sociologists, so we can't simply accept the data as they are, but we have the task to reconstruct the social technical processes that have shaped them. And we have to remember always the inseparability of methods from the constant context in which it's produced. And so we have to move in a framework of a mixed creative and critical methodology. And only with this kind of framework, the current technological ethos of social research can be effectively incorporated into our discipline. Otherwise, and now I recall again John Stuart Mill's, all this digital data will simply remain confused fragments of reality.
Thank you, Angela. Now we have again Sonia Stefanizzi, but now she will speak as Sonia Stefanizzi from University of Milan Bicocca. Before, I remember she was speaking as Vice President of the Italian Sociological Association, but now Professor Stefanizzi, you can start.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here with you, even if from a distance. The title of my presentation is Sociological of Quantification for Research Action. Almost a decade ago, when talking about the sociology of quantification, some scholars state that sociologists are generally reluctant to investigate quantification as a social phenomenon in its own right. With the increasing gratification of contemporary society, thanks in part to the development new technology and the spread of huge amount of data stored in digital databases, the amount of which is constantly adapting, a radical change is taking place in the way research is done and how scientific knowledge is produced. Also, the development of digital involved a sort of scientific revolution, namely the shift to the fourth paradigm. The sociology of quantification is, in my opinion, struggling to find a well-defined study. Please, can you close the microphone?
Yes, please, if you can have closer microphone, because the quality from here is not the best one. Try to have a microphone closer to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will say the sociology of quantification is struggling to find a well-defined object of study, shared theoretical concept and methodologies. There are multiple questions that arise when we're talking about the society of quantification, and each of these finds its own empirical declination. A first question we can ask concerns the process that shapes the production of numbers, and when and how numbers can contribute to changing social reality. Perhaps, given the amount of data available, it becomes more appropriate, in my opinion, to investigate how to govern quantification. Numbers play an important and growing role in governing social and individual dimensions. How then should we, in turn, govern numbers? Do we simply have to accept their proliferation in whatever form as inevitable, or are there better or worse ways to use them? Take, for example, the rankings that are produced annually to draw up rankings about the cities where the quality of life is highest, or the rankings of the most prestigious universities. These forms of quantification, while simple, are strongly transformative and offer interesting insights into how numbers can cause responsiveness and reshape individual cognitive maps. The transformative effect of this and other forms of quantification can focus directly on the individual and the dimension of his or her daily life. One of the trends moving in this direction is the so-called quantified self, a diverse set of self-observation tools that moves between the domains of wearable technologies and the Internet of Things. In quantified self, the concept of information is applied to everyday life, and instead of technology, focus on the person. In the United States, it has generated real communities dedicated to measuring, for example, calories consumed, miles traveled, quality of sleep, down to very detailed aspects of one's daily life. As Deborah Lupton argues, self-tracking, that is, monitoring, measuring and recording elements of one's body and life as a form of self-improvement or self-reflection, is a practice derived from digital technologies that are shaped as a product of a broader social, cultural and political process. The practice through which people consciously and intentionally monitor their daily life, bodies and behaviors may be aimed on the one hand at satisfying one's curiosity about the resulting behavior or bodily patterns. On the other hand, they may have a more specific goal-oriented purpose, giving meaning to the information one chooses to collect in order to identify patterns that can improve health, fitness, emotional well-being, social relationship, or work productivity. Self-knowledge by numbers can be understood as an intriguing way of using information derived from self-tracking for personal goals, or of improving one's self-esteem and life, but it can be also understood as an undertaking that is not exclusively voluntary, but on the contrary, encouraged and even imposed on individuals to meet goal of another kind by generating profit for those who use it commercially or by facilitating the management and governance of individuals. Moreover, as Beer and Boros point out, this data have a vitality of their own in the digital data economy due to the fact that they circulate and act new form of knowledge and are used and reused in many different ways. In other words, they have a social life of their own, completely independent of the humans who originally generated them. From a sociological perspective, this particular family of new quantification technologies draws attention to a number of overlapping questions that I propose here, maybe as new lines of research. Why are people attracted to self-tracking? How do they interpret and use the data they produce? How are concepts of body, self, social relation, and social behavior constructed and negotiated through this data? The question we can ask is how liberating or governing are the numbers? It's also possible that self-quantification produce a subject who is neither liberated nor enslaved, but simple different. The solipsism of the constant attention to one's numbers may contribute to the creation of a self-involved subject who engages less with external world because of the possibility of having a broader access to one's internal world. In light of the above, the evidence seems clear that the numbers have the potential to powerfully distort the trajectories of individuals and organizations. In the state of perpetual connection in which we are immersed, as scholar Nise Bound would say, there is no longer a private and a public sphere, but a plurality of space within which information acquires meaning depending on the context in which it is conveyed, the actors who receive it, and the social expectation invested in it. Therefore, the real problem is not with the information itself, but with the context in which it is made public. Rather than invoking generic privacy protection, it would be more appropriate to reflect on this very lack of contextual integrity to which our personal data are subjected on daily basis. According to this bound, context integrity is, in fact, defined in terms of informational norms. It is preserved when informational norms are respected and violated when informational norms are violated. Informational norms are those that pertain to the transmission, communication, distribution, and dissemination of information. Contextual integrity is lost when, through ignorance or intentionally, those norms are disregarded or neglected. In conclusion, finally, I think that any quantification of any phenomenon will always provide a partial, through sometimes very useful view of it. Right now, we are witnessing an explosion of analysis and modeling that, in addition to failing to give due consideration to how data are generated and collected. This is, what quantities are actually measured are completely or almost exclusively data-driven. That is, they try to let the data speak without, in my opinion, caring too much about the particularity of the phenomenon under study. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Stefanizzi. A part of a very important part of society is the question of religion, and now also we know that religion is also online. So we decided also to invite specialists of digital region, Italian specialists, two specialists of Italian digital region for another university of Italy, which is University of Campania, another again my region. So now accepted our invite Professor Claudia Santi and Daniele Solvi. I think they have also a presentation, isn't it? So you can share your presentation here. Thank you very much.
Greeting, estimate fellow scholars, and thanks to our colleague and dear friend, Professor Giuseppe Maiello, and the organization committee for their invitation. We are delighted to welcome you to our presentation titled The Internet Science Project, a Geographical Exploration on the Web. Now I try to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, okay. In this presentation, we will delve into the realm of hagiography in the digital age and explore how online resources have revolutionized the field of hagiographical research. During our presentation, we will provide an overview of our project structure and progress. We will discuss the methodologies employed in our research, the challenge encountered in navigating the digital landscape, and the insight we have gained through our exploration. Additionally, we'll showcase a specific case study and highlight the significance of this internal science in contemporary religious and cultural context. The Internal Science Project emerged from a profound interest and passion for exploring the convergence of hagiography and the digital realm. Hagiography, the study of the lives and signs and holy figures, of great significance in religious and cultural and social contexts. Hagiographic narratives not only deepen our understanding of religious belief, but also offer insights into the social, cultural, and historical context in which these saints and holy figures lived. The project is coordinated by me and Professor Solvi, with the valuable contribution of a group of talented young scholars. My role within the project team is to organize and promote research on the topic of holy figures in non-Christian religious systems and in purely secular contexts where religious content is reshaped and reinterpreted. The Internal Science Project is funded by the Italian Ministry of Research PRIN 2020, which supports projects of significant relevance through a competitive call, as well as the research funds provided by the University Luigi Vanvitelli. The project is based in the Laboratory of Historical, Anthropological and Social Research, RECMEND, Religions, Cultures of the Mediterranean and Beyond, which is housed within the Department of Letters and Cultural Heritage. Our primary aim is to conduct in-depth hagiographical investigation into diverse religious traditions, such as Christianity, the New Age movement, Buddhism, pop culture, and more, utilizing the vast and diverse array of digital platforms available to us. The Internet expanding reach and the growing accessibility of information have opened up new avenues for uncovering and analyzing hagiographic narratives within the expansive visual landscape. Traditionally, scholars relied on ancient texts, manuscripts, and archival materials to study and analyze hagiographic accounts. The emergence of digital platforms and the widespread availability of information of the Internet have revolutionized the field. Researchers now have unprecedented access to a vast array of digital resources, offering new possibilities for exploring hagiographic narratives. We employ a range of methodologies, including textual analysis, iconographic and semiotic studies, comparative research, and digital humanities approaches to shed light to everything associated with science and holiness comprehensively. One of the key advantages of utilizing the Internet for hagiographical exploration is the sheer volume and diversity of available materials. Online platforms provide access to ancient texts, biographical accounts, iconography, devotional practice, and scholarly commentaries from various religious traditions. The digital landscapes offer an expansive range of primary and secondary sources that were once confined to specialized libraries and archives. This accessibility enables scholars to engage with a broader range of narratives and perspectives, fostering a more comprehensive understanding of hagiography. Hagiography in the digital age presents both exciting opportunities and unique challenges. The Internet allows us to share knowledge and engage in dialogues that transcend geographical boundaries. However, it is crucial to critically navigate the vast amounts of information available to assess the level of authority and authenticity of online research. Since its inception in 2018, the project has achieved significant milestones. We have organized an international conference, held 5 annual updates, curated a panel dedicated to the exploration of Blessed Carlo Acutis as a potential patron saint of the Internet, and published 2 volumes collecting the contribution from these events. We have conducted 4 accessible online interviews and the thematic discussion have been recorded and can be viewed on YouTube. As part of our project, we have created a Facebook group called I Santi Internauti Seminario Permanente, the International Permanent Seminary. Our Facebook group serves as a hub for sharing information, updates, and resources related to our project. Here, followers can stay informed about the latest news and events we are undertaking. Within the Facebook group, members have the opportunity to connect, collaborate, and exchange ideas. It provides a space where participants can engage in discussion, share their experiences, and showcase their expertise. Our goal is to provide valuable content that sparks conversation. Through this group, we aim to foster a supportive community that encourages innovative methodologies in the study of hagiography. All these endeavors involved the collaboration of over 30 scholars from Italy, Belgium, Canada, the United Kingdom, Brazil, the Netherlands, and other countries. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to all those who have contributed their time, expertise, and dedication to this project. Without their collaboration, none of this would be possible.
Claudia?
Yes.
Can I continue?
Yes.
The emergence of digital religion has become a vital framework for understanding the dynamics of contemporary religious practices. Scholars like Fabrizio Vecoli and Giulia Evolvi have emphasized its significance in shaping the field of hagiographic research. Within this framework, the old questions of hagiographic scholarship find a new application. How is the image of a saint constructed or reconstructed? What agencies promote the cult and for what purposes? Which channels and languages are chosen to disseminate the hagiographic message? The research possibilities within this field are diverse and expansive. In the online realm, we encounter not only digital native saints, that is, new saints born directly in the digital age, but also long-established cults that have found new avenues for dissemination after centuries of existence. Alessandra Bartolome's work on the medieval cult of the Dominican tertiary Margherita da Città di Castello exemplifies this transformation. This old local cult experienced an extraordinary revival on the internet to the extent that digital sanctity fame became a specific chapter included in the documents evaluated during a recent canonization process. The concept of a saint extends beyond the specific Christian or Catholic traditions, encompassing forms of sanctity by analogy. For instance, Antonio Salvati's exploration of the figure of Diego Armando Maradona highlights how the transition from football fields to the social environment of Neapolitan and Argentine fans has given rise to mythical and ritual forms that consciously mimic those of Catholic liturgy and devotion. Saint Francis of Assisi stands as an exemplary case in many ways. He is one of the most renowned saints within the Catholic tradition, with a large audience of devotees and admirers that assumes distinctly transconfessional and transcultural characteristics. To explore the huge mass of online data concerning St. Francis, we have selected Pinterest as a source of significant information. Pinterest, an American social medium, allows users to create digital pin boards where they can pin visual objects. We have gathered a sample of over 600 pins, focusing exclusively on those representing iconic forms, from the most sophisticated text-image associations to simple text lettering, that directly attribute quotations to the saint. These short texts appear in ever-evolving forms and are not only derived from Francis's written works, but also from hagiographic legends about him. They undergo continuous edits and variations that reflect the fluid nature of postmodern society. While there is a strong emphasis on attributing these quotes to St. Francis, a philological analysis reveals that they are mostly apocryphal and sometimes anachronistic. These quotations do not reflect the original words of Francis, but rather a 21st century avatar of the saint, largely secularized and aligned with contemporary sensibilities. While Francis has long been associated with themes of world peace or ecology, recent research highlights new developments. He is now perceived in a more individual dimension, blending aspects of Christian spirituality with transversal themes like inner peace, acts of daily kindness, love for pets, and trust in human potential. In reality, internet users are not seeking the authentic Francis, but rather an enchanted mirror through which they can observe themselves. The process of consuming cultural content aims, first of all, at identifying and positioning oneself within the virtual community. In this sense, a devotee behaves like any other social media follower. By using the ready-made materials provided by Pinterest, individuals can build a gallery of their own tastes and thoughts, imbued with the aura of a recognized charismatic authority. The religious worship has turned into a form of self-construction and self-expression. From a geographic point of view, this dynamic of decontextualization is highly original. The legends and works of St. Francis are reduced to a mere storage of sayings and phrases to be quoted, so disarticulating and reinventing the traditional discourse on the saint and sanctity. While this separation of sayings and thoughts from facts and writings may lead to a loss of historical authenticity, it is also a necessary step for an easy recontextualization of these quotes within the specific reality of the users. In so doing, cyber devotees perceive Francis as a personal trainer who motivates and leads them in their daily struggles. The saint's function shifts from being a patron to a testimonial. The case study of St. Francis of Assisi shows how hagiographic studies, by integrating diachrony and synchrony, can shed new light not only on their specific field of research, but also on broader cultural dynamics within contemporary society. This would not be possible without a transchronic approach, which combines the quantitative data of our digital present with the qualitative point of view derived from a scholarly tradition born in the analog era. The web has enhanced the heuristic capabilities of this tradition by providing a wider research field and new development possibilities. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Daniele. I was afraid that you will speak more, but you are also perfect. So now we have also Anthony Giddens here, my friends. How is possible? I remember I was teaching in a very small town here in the Czech Republic calling Vsetín. And I was explaining about Anthony Giddens to my students, and and the students they were looking to Wikipedia, and they say, "Oh, Mr. Professor, Anthony Giddens today has birthday." I say, "Oh my God, his birthday!" So we had a photo, and I was looking for his address. So I went to Chamber of Lords, UK, and I found his email address, and we made a photo from this small town from Vsetín, and we sent to Professor Giddens a photo. "Happy birthday, Professor Giddens!" And after 15 minutes, we got the answer from Professor Giddens. So I'm really I think it's good that Professor Giddens has the birthday in the right day. So. Thank you for being here, Professor Giddens, and now it's up to you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and I have to say that I'm a social theorist rather than a methodological researcher, so you will have to assess what I say in those terms, but thank you very much for inviting me to the conference, and I hope you have a very happy and productive 2 or 3 days. Given that the conference is happening in Prague, if you'll forgive me, I'd like to briefly pay tribute to President Václav Havel, who I knew both before he became president of the Czech Republic, and afterwards, and visited him often in the castle, and Forum 2000, which I helped to some degree to set up, I'm happy to say is still going after about 28 years, so that's quite an achievement. I wish everyone a very happy and productive conference. If you want to know who I am, I'm a professor at the LSE, sort of, a fellow of King's College, Cambridge, sort of, and a member of the House of Lords. So I try and mix these two things, but I have to stress that I'm a social theorist, not a methodological researcher, and therefore I have a rather different take on some of these issues probably from lots of people sitting here, although I learned a lot from the earlier two speakers. Over recent years, I've become... Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Over recent years, I've become absolutely absorbed with the impact of the digital revolution and AI, but I try to fit this into a broader complex of changes going on in the wider society. Since I'm lucky enough to be in the Parliament, we've been to meet many of the leaders in the area of AI and digital innovation, and there's one that particularly sticks in my mind and figures quite significantly in the book I'm writing at the moment. The book I'm writing is called Off the Edge of History, The World in the 21st Century. The theme of it is that we're living in a historical space that no one has ever inhabited before because of a conflux of changes concentrated largely only in the last 60 or so years, which are genuinely massively transformative, which are genuinely and fully global for the first time ever. We have never lived in a world like this before. So the methodological aspect of it is very important, but I think also, well, I wish to theorize this historical moment in which we live. And one particular meeting I had in my role in the House of Lords sticks in my mind, and probably does in that of lots of people here who would have watched on other sources, which was meeting the people at DeepMind about a few years ago when they were in King's Cross. We went and interviewed them, talked to Demis Hammambis and the others standing there in their jeans, very young. And I thought, these people have possibly transformed history more than certainly any major political leader. Everyone here will know, I'm sure, that DeepMind beat the world champion at Go. Go is a game supposed to be something like 1 trillion times more complex than chess. And then the machine created a new version, purely digitally, which beat the first version. So that is quite awesome stuff. And the theme of my book is we must theorize this historical moment. You can't just theorize it from inside the digital revolution. You have to fold it into the wider complex of changes, which is helping to promote, but which is also obviously very deeply influenced by. And well, that's what I seek to do in the book that I'm writing. And obviously social media do figure a lot in this. And let me just mention certain aspects of this, because never before in human history has cutting-edge technology ever gone en masse to poorer peoples of the world. And this has happened in such a short period. In this case, something like 10 to 15 years, although it's obviously a much longer build-up. So huge numbers of people in Africa, India, and including many, many poorer people have smartphones. The smartphone in your pocket, and I'm sure everyone has got their smartphone close to them because they've become like part of the body for us. Dirt poor farmers in Africa use a smartphone to find water holes for their animals. So that is something quite, off the wall extraordinary. And, the smartphone in your pocket is more powerful than the computers that took people to the moon. I mean, that is awesome. And it's no wonder that it's become almost part of the body, because people walk around kind of holding their smartphones. And you know, the changes in this, I feel we have to theorize and not just study. We have to fold in the methodology you're talking about to an understanding of just how different this is and what form of intimacy and other kinds of much more macroscopic changes it's produced. I just wrote a blurb, you know, a couple of sentences for a brilliant book on sexuality in India, which is going to be published by Cambridge University Press. It focuses mainly on women in India and shows just how amazingly complex is the entanglement of tradition versus avant-garde lifestyles. Nearly all of that carried by digital technology, actually, nearly always through the smartphone, not through computers, of course. And this is quite an extraordinary sort of transformation of ordinary everyday life. And to me, you know, you never had a world where women even aspired to be equal to men. So this is as big a transformation as any of the others, I think. And I've got others that I won't mention in this talk, but there's a whole sort of folding gigantic transformations. I mean, the obvious one is we've never been in space before. Through 10,000 years of human civilization, it only goes back to the 60s. Incidentally, the phone in your pocket was created by geopolitics, always comes back to be geopolitics. It wasn't created in Silicon Valley, really. It was created by the Cold War. When the Russians sent Laika the dog into space, then Yuri Gagarin followed. The US followed with a massive program of government investment in universities and technology that created the digital revolution. So, I mean, there's a connection between the intimacies of everyday life and the smartphone and global politics, which we've never seen before. Can I just briefly say a few words about the COVID-19 pandemic, because I notice it figures on the agenda of some of the speakers, and we do have to think, I think, systematically about this. It's crucial, I think, to see that it's not just a rerun of previous pandemics, but something quite different. I call it the world's first digidemic because it's so thoroughly infused with digital interconnection. The speed and scope of its spread was made possible by the huge interconnections in the world, which in turn are facilitated by digital connection. So it spread massively more quickly than Spanish flu in 1918, for example. Second, however, our response was much more preemptive than was ever possible before. This was also because of digital interconnection. And you have to say that Zoom played a core role in this, and we're operating on now, and saved millions of lives, actually, because people were able to remotely. If you focus back to Spanish flu, the numbers of people who died across the world would be massively greater. And the digital is everywhere, because what happened was a crucial sort of break was the Chinese decoded the genetic structure of the virus in 10 days only, using partly quantum computers. And a very brave Chinese scientist, Professor Zhang Yongzhen, circulated to the rest of the world. That made possible the creation of the vaccines on a gigantic scale that we've never seen before. All that is also because of its entanglement with the digital world and what the digital world made possible. In my view, millions of lives were actually saved, as I said, by that. The story of Zoom is really interesting. I don't know if people know that. It was created by Eric Yuan. Everyone uses it. It got about 90 million hits over the course of the pandemic. But the origins of innovation always interest me, because Eric Yuan was living in China, he's Chinese, and he lived about a 9-hour train journey from his girlfriend, and he thought there has to be a better way of making connection. Therefore, he set up Zoom, and then Zoom transformed the world. Can you get a better connection of intimate emotions and external macro structures than that? So, you know, I'm not just pessimistic about the world. I call this a high opportunity, high risk society, where you can't calculate stochastically the relationship between the opportunities and risks, because we don't have the data to do that, and because so much is new, so much is new. Finally, I think this conference must include some material on the debate about generative AI, because it's deeply folded into social media anyway. I've never, in all my 10 years of working with AI as a sociologist, I haven't come across anything like this before. It's an example of itself. It's sort of a very global debate about generative AI, and most people here will know that Elon Musk and about 2,000 other scientists signed a letter saying it's existential risk for us. I'm not sure I agree with that, but this is part of our imminent future for humanity. I don't think personally that generative AI is an existential threat, or not yet, because it doesn't have any institutional sort of system of its own. It depends on individuals. But what we should remember, Durkheim's famous statement, society is infinitely greater than the sum of the individuals who compose it at any one time. So you couldn't have generative AI without AI, with a whole structure of science and so forth. And AI can't just stride into this. But what is happening, I think, to us in conclusion, is that we're kind of merging with intelligent machines. And the fact you can't let go of your phone, or it's always by you, or you feel lost without it, is one example of that in the case of social media. But I think it's a much more generic thing. And what this fusion will amount to, we don't know. But I come back to my starting point. We've never lived in a period of history like this before, but it's always grounded in history, and that's part of the origin of populism and the other kinds of movements we see, which are themselves often largely carried digitally. Thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. Professor, thank you very much. I can assure you that I can assure the people are here that what we see on the screen are still real person, but we know that maybe in the future they could be created by artificial intelligence. I can also assure you that I will test now that yes. React is alive. I mean, what we are here are still humans. You didn't expect my attack, Mr. Potocký, you know. But we are no. Maybe I'm thinking that maybe we are studying too much. Also, the methodology we are doing, all the saints, all these things, maybe because it's a kind to cut ourselves from what is happening in the world. And thank you, Mr. Professor, that he remembered us this period of not only of our life, not only of many generations which was before us, but also for the future generation. Here, Mr. Professor, we have very, very young people. I don't know if the camera can show all the young people that are here. But anyway, because we are not digital here on this site, we will have a break now, coffee break. And we will eat in a very analogical way. For now, Mr. Potocký, you are still alive. I know you are still a human, but don't look. Sometimes you look like a robot, you know. So we are afraid of it. Well, anyway, we go downstairs now here on the right side, and I'd like to invite you at 11:30. No, at 11:30, exactly 11:30 at the Lectio Magistralis from Professor Nico Carpentier. You have in the program the discursive material, not theoretical reflection about the dialogues between discourse studies and new materialism. So we will see at 11:30 here. Also, you are on the other side. You are on the screen. Maybe we believe you are really there. Take a coffee. Take a really good coffee. Thank you very much for attending this part of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So it's my honor to have here Nico Carpentier, which is as me lives in Prague but comes from another country, from northern Belgium, what I say. And Nico accepted our invitation. I hope that he's enjoying here with us, but we are going to enjoy his Lectio Magistralis. The Italians when they prepared the programs, they like this Latin. But it's maybe it's better than keynote speech, if you like it, Nico.
I prefer the Latin.
Okay, Nico also prefer the Latin. So please, Nico can start his presentation. And I repeat, if you want to, you have the last chance to reserve for the dinner. And and again, I put on the desks this QR code, especially for you are in Prague. Take a picture of this QR code in the case we have to say something, or tomorrow morning you lose yourself in Prague because of there will be this visit of Prague. We have this chat, and so I'm on there also, and the organizers are on there, so you can always contact with us. Okay, thank you very much. And so now Professor Carpentier is going to have his speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation. As always, it's a pleasure to be here, from one Prague inhabitant to the other, but also as one non-Czech to the other non-Czech, which is a perfect combination for any kind of conversation in a European context. Thanks also for bearing with me. This will be a bit of a theoretical talk, so be warned. If things really get too much, it's okay to put your head on the desk and relax if need be. But bear with me. I'll have several parts in my talk, and I'll actually start with the reflection on the digital, then I'll go to the discursive material, and I will return to the digital. That's a bit the big setup of today. You ready? Good. If we look at the digital, what I would like to argue is that it is a floating signifier. A floating signifier is one of the concepts coming out of discourse theory, arguing that one particular concept, a signifier, actually is incorporated in a diversity of discourses and gains different meanings there. And that makes the meaning of that signifier float, hence a floating signifier. It doesn't mean that there's no meaning. It actually means that there is a diversity of meanings, sometimes contradictory, sometimes complementary, sometimes totally confusing, sometimes totally clear. But there is this diversity of meanings. And if we start looking at the some of the key concepts in our speech, academic speeches about the digital, then we see that floating at work. And I want to use some of my own examples, some of my own teachings or research projects as examples to illustrate that. And what you see here is an authentic PowerPoint slide that I was using 15 years ago. So this is sort of a Wayback Machine, if you want to have it in digital terms. And it is actually quite interesting to see the prominence of the concept of virtuality. When we were talking about the digital in, say, 10, 15 years ago, we were actually talking about the distinction, even the juxtaposition of the virtual and the real. And if you look at authors like Reingold, who's still happily smiling up there, very San Francisco being, if you look at his work, you'll read all about the virtual community, which is one of these key concepts that he helped introducing. But there were many, many other combinations of virtual with a particular realm of the social that we were highlighting, always in contradiction with the real, which is problematic, we now know, because obviously also the virtual was real. But we wanted somehow to argue that the virtual was only the virtual and not the real. And that was very much on the agenda of digital media studies, say 10, 15 years ago. If you look at the virtual museum, again, the notion of virtuality was totally present, and it was again juxtaposed to the real museum, the museum where you could enter. This is actually one of the upper part is one of the screenshots and actually leaflets of a very first virtual museum. In the early 2000s, when I was writing about the Antwerp Contemporary Arts Museum, the MUCA, I actually looked at how they saw this virtual museum, and I can, it's not a secret. The conclusion was that that was quite miserable, but that's another story. I too was using this notion of virtuality without any sort of hesitation back then. One of the areas, though, where the notion of virtuality has persisted is in the discussions on virtual reality and the use of, for instance, goggles to try to, in a very simplistic version, trying to understand and actually access a different world, a virtual reality. When we were, and when I was curating an exhibition in Cyprus called Respublika, we had one artwork there by Will Kendrick, you actually see it up there, that was using goggles. It was the most popular thing for visitors to do. They were totally fascinated, and this is only 10 years ago, they were totally fascinated by entering into this world of the virtual through the use of very, very basic goggles. More recently, more and more critical voices developed, also taking this notion of the virtual more from a representational perspective. Molding Nature is an exhibition that I'm co-curating. It will actually launch in Stockholm in August this year. One of the works there is by Samuel Michelson, who is using what is called in architecture rendered images. And he's actually taking the same place, a square, and rendering it in always different ways to show the representational dynamics of the virtual, actually to critique the idea that the virtual is a unique and perfect representation, actually showing its multiplicity. That's one, the use of virtuality. Second, the use of new media. Do you still remember? We used to call the digital, we used to call that the new media. Not that long ago. Manovich's book, which is actually really good, is about the language of new media. Henry Jenkins's work is about, and this is one of the edited volumes, has done many other things, including convergence culture. It is about democracy and new media, with the emphasis on novelty. I actually also used, and this is one of these old presentation slides from a decade or so ago, I used the same language. New media's claims for novelty. This was quite customary when we were talking about the digital. No longer this is the case. We now talk about online media, we talk about the digital, so we've abandoned that language for good reasons, I think. But my favorite example that is actually a critical evaluation of this discourse of novelty is Caroline Marvin's work when all technologies were new. And this was in the heydays of new media studies. She published a book saying, well, if you go back to electronic communication in the late 19th century, we were using exactly the same discourse of novelty when talking about these media, these electronic media, actually questioning the label of novelty, the label of new media. If we take the more contemporary reflections on the digital, and we take, and I really like Marek Deuse's work, for the record. If we take Marek Deuse's work on media life and life in media, he has developed the idea that we are now engulfed in the digital, that there is no escape to the digital, that media life is life. And he uses, and that's actually what the book cover is about, he uses the metaphor of the fish in the water. The idea that the fish, if it is in the water, it cannot see the water. It does not know the concept of water because the fish is surrounded by it. And Deuze is arguing that when it comes to digital technologies, we are now in the same position. Media life is constituted through the logics of the digital. And if we look at that entire trajectory, we see a huge shift. We see 10, 15 years ago in digital media studies, we saw the emphasis on the idea that it's only the virtual, that is something totally different from the real. And that has floated into, remember the floating signifier, that has floated into the idea that the digital is everywhere and that we are the digital. And that produces this effect. It is confusing, but it also raises questions. How do we deal with reality, virtuality, immersion, replacement? I can play this for a while. If it doesn't drive you mad, I don't know what does. It's one of these little presentation tricks, like just terrorize your audience.
We cannot hear you anymore online.
Anyway, it raises questions that are very related to Baudrillard's work on the hyperreal, the simulations of the simulations. How are we dealing with this floating of the signifier of the digital? And my argument is, let's take a step back. Let's look at what's behind that debate on virtuality, reality, immersion, the hyperreal, the digital hyperreal, if you want. And let's try to figure out how that relationship between the representational, the discursive on the one hand, and the materiality of the digital, how that pans out. And that's my second part. So the good news is you survived the first part. Second part coming up. And that is a bit taking us into the entanglement, theories of entanglement between the discursive and the material. And this is, well, this is the self-promotional narcissistic slide, as it's called. In case you are interested, this is very much this kind of arguing. It's very much based on the discursive material notebook that I wrote a couple of years ago. That book, and I think my narrative here, starts from a discourse theoretical perspective. And in particular, Ernesto Laclau and Chantal Mouffe's take on discourse theory, which is part of the broader family of discourse studies. What is particular in their work, though, are a couple of things. First, their definition of discourse is really particular. We often think, when we talk about discourse, we think in terms of language. Discourse is language. What Laclau and Mouffe and what I am doing is to talk about discourse in terms of ideology, in terms of representation. So whenever you hear me refer to the discursive, I am referring to an ideological, to a representational realm. The ideas behind language, embedded in language, communicated through language, which is different than language itself. So that's a key point if you want to understand this part of the story. What Laclau and Mouffe also add is, of course, coming from a post-structuralist position, the importance of contingency, the idea of floating, of fluidity, of our realities, our discursive realities, not being ultimately stabilized. But they add, in different, I think, settings than other post-structuralist thinkers, they add one key idea. We humans, we stabilize reality. We intervene, we politically intervene to construct a reality which is stable, which is sedimented, which is hegemonic, which doesn't float that much. But their point as post-structuralist is it can always float again. It can always be made to move again. But so what Laclau and Mouffe emphasize when they talk about the discursive is this balance between, on the one hand, contingency, movability, fluidity, and the other hand, stability, fixation, sedimentation, hegemony. That's what discourse theory for them is about. And I won't go into reading out too many details, but what they have been critiqued for in discourse theory is the idea that they were basically only interested in discourse. That discourse was all there was for them. I think that was not a fair critique, but the critique exists. It is the critique of idealism. The critique that they were all tiny little cute Hegelians. And if you read Josef's comment from 20 years ago on the key publication, Hegemony and Socialist Strategy of Laclau and Mouffe, you will see that Joseph is actually referring to the Geist, which is a concept of Hegel, right? And it is a critique against Laclau and Mouffe of being only interested in an idealist configuration. Again, I don't think this is true. If you look at their work, they will acknowledge materiality intensely. If you look at some of their theoretical concepts, they actually work with the material. The idea of dislocation is crucial. Social heterogeneity is crucial. But fair is fair. They could have spent a bit more attention looking at the material and how the material interacts and intersects with the discursive. And for that, we can bring in the help of some friends. Another philosophical tradition that has been developed quite in parallel, maybe a bit later, but still in parallel, is new materialism. One of the key proponents is actually Bruno Latour, who's very invested in a model which is called ANT, Actor Network Theory, the idea that we are all part of networks of different actors, where the material, the planet, where objects, bodies are all part of that set of interactions in an actor network model. But it even actually goes further. I don't know if you recognize the other guy there. This is the interactive moment. You've all dreamt of Heidegger, I'm sure. But if you start looking at Heidegger's work about objects, you'll find a very similar validation of the importance of thinginess, Dinglichkeit in German. And his example, and you might be surprised that one of the great philosophers of our times has been writing about hammers, but his key example is about the hammer and the thingliness of the hammer, the fact that the object has its own characteristics and actually its own agency. It does things. And that's been picked up by new materialists to emphasize that the material has agency, that it does things on its own, whether we want it or not. And that is what Karen Barat has called the agential matter, what De Lande has called generative matter. It's the idea that the material does things. And if you want to have one example, allow me to go back. One example, it's great to say climate change doesn't exist. You can produce that discourse, but if you're standing on one little island in the Pacific, the water level will rise. Your feet will get wet. That's the material agency. It does things. Whether you want it, whether you think differently about it, whether you deny it, the water will still rise. That's the agency of the material at its core. And of course, new materialism has paid tribute to the representational, to the discursive. They have said, yeah, the discursive matters. Discourse theorists have also said, well, materiality matters, but they all say our thing matters more. Materialists, new materialists would actually focus on materiality. Discourse theorists would focus on the discursive, even if they would acknowledge the importance of the other. And there are a few exceptions. This is a quote from Donna Haraway, And if you're into cyborg theory, you'll know her because she's one of the key proponents of cyborg theory. The machine is not an it to be animated, worshipped, and dominated. The machine is us. I can't put it any better. I mean, we could just wrap up and go home after that quote. It actually argues that technology is intersecting with identity, with representation, with discourse, with who we are. And she literally says the body is simultaneously historical, natural, technical, discursive, and material. It intersects, it is entangled, it is combined, it is articulated. This is my romantic slide. I'm still at the theoretical level though, so we'll kill all romanticism with my next sentence. The discursive and the material find themselves in a position of entanglement. They constantly interact with each other. The discursive is not more important than the material is not more important than the discursive. They're constantly intersecting, interacting, working with each other, working against each other, but they're constantly knotted. They're constantly entangled. And if we want to understand social reality, we might need to acknowledge that they're both important. And as I believe in more equal relationships, they're equally important. That's the romantic part of my presentation. Back to the hard reality of then different kinds of modeling. Because, of course, when you start thinking, and I will not even bother to explain this, if you start thinking about how the discursive and the material are entangled, we can, and this is actually nice that Giddens was speaking before me, which is quite an honor, because one of the support dimensions that I enjoy using is the structure agency support dimension, which is very much tributary to Anthony Giddens' theoretical work. But this is sort of one of my little visual games. This is impossible to explain, obviously, and it's intended to show the impossibility of explaining the complicated relationships. But I can also try to unpack some of them, and that is the simpler version that you see here. We need the discursive because the discursive provides meaning. We cannot have meaning outside the discursive. It is something we humans do. We generate meanings. And that is a necessity. That is something that the discursive does, what we use the discursive for. Interestingly enough, the discursive also defines us. It produces our identities. It tells us who we are. If we are a mother or a father, a student or a professor, that is a subject position. That is an idea within a discourse. And we might play with it, we might start bending it, remember Judith Butler's work, but it is something that is discursive, and we internalize it, we become socialized. On the other hand, the material actually plays an equal role. It does things on its own. Of course, it gains signification through the discursive, but it can also dislocate discourses. It can destroy them. Climate change. Remember, we believed that our lives would be perfect, that we could go for infinite growth, that we could use, in a very instrumentalist way, an anthropocentric way, we could use the planet for our well-being as a resource. The planet thought differently, and we're in a mess now because of that. Our discourse of endless growth is dislocated. This is where the material actually undermines our ways of thinking. We can go on believing that we will go for endless growth. The planet will not allow us. And in environmental theory, the planet is actually now renamed because they often use, in environmental theory, they use Gaia to actually put a name on what a planet can do, to emphasize material agency. So the material does things. It can dislocate, but it can also invite us to produce discourses. My morbid example, death. Death is deeply material. It's our cells actually disintegrating, right? That's basically what happens. That's the material process. But we are invited to give meaning to death all the time. It's not something we can sort of say, well, if we think really hard, it will go away. Obviously, death will be with us. But we are invited to discursify it. We are invited to give meaning to it. And that is the invitational capacity of the material. You're still with me? Still alive? This works perfectly. Death is this endless territory of jokes. I'm really sorry for that, morbid as we sometimes can be. Now, this is the ontological discussion. This is how the discursive and the material interact. In practice, in social practice, at what is called the ontic level, the level of social practice, these combinations of the discursive and the material, of discourses, signifying practices, voices, of materials, is always unique. And for that, I use a different concept. I use the concept of the assemblage to indicate that I'm talking about a particular combination of discourses, voices, signifying practices. And that is a concept that comes from Guattari, from Deleuze, and others have worked with that in what is called assemblage theory. It is one of these areas where we find a concept that allows us to think about this combination of the discursive and the material at very pragmatic levels. And the best metaphor I can give you, and you might be surprised, I'm not going to talk too much about Deleuze or Guattari, because that's maybe a bit too far. But this is much better, because this is an assemblage. And of course you have large assemblages that group smaller assemblages. This, us being here together, and you hopefully listening to me, is an assemblage. It combines a whole set of discourses, signifying practices, me speaking, and the whole set of materials. Microphone, camera, your bodies, my body, my voice, which is also making the air move. That's an assemblage. But we are part of a much broader assemblage of the educational system, of academia. That's another assemblage, which is much larger. So like a matryoshka, you'll find these different assemblages within assemblages within assemblages, always combining discursive and material elements. Maybe this is closer to reality. It's not a clean-cut, very clear one matryoshka. It's a whole series of matryoshkas overlapping, cross-secting, partially being embedded into each other, partially being outside each other. Of course, social reality is not as clean-cut as this one. This is closer to how assemblages work. And I should probably warn you that in some cases they can also hide. They're not always very visible. And they might not always be very benevolent. Right? And this is being in Prague. This is the ultimate moment of showing this poster, which was used to refer to the Museum of Communism. Sometimes assemblages can be extremely destructive, malign, and literally helping us to a different part of the world or to the other world. Let me give you a few examples of assemblages based on some of the research that I have been doing to make it maybe a bit more practical, to illustrate what I mean when talking about assemblages. One example, a lot of the research I've been doing is on Cyprus, being very interested in participatory communicational settings, but also interested in conflict and conflict transformation. The CCMC, the Cyprus Community Media Center, is one of the community media broadcasters that were very committed to conflict transformation, bringing Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots together in one space, allowing them to produce media content together. Very transformatory, conflict transformatory agenda that this organization, which no longer exists, used to have. It is, if you know Cyprus a bit, it is in the middle of a buffer zone. So whenever you move there, you're like surrounded by barbed wire, checkpoints, military. It is within the UN guarded buffer zone. The hotel you see at the back, the building at the back, is the Ledra Palace, which is the headquarters of the British peacekeeping troops in that region. So it's a very militarized area, a demilitarized, militarized area, where there is a group of people working on peace. But that's an assemblage. The building, the bodies of the producers, of Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, and many other communities traveling there to work together, surrounded by that plays by different technologies or proto-machines, if you want to have a different word, services, commodities. You need to have electricity there, which is in the buffer zone not always that easy to get. You need financial resources. You need capital. There are all sorts of materialities, but there are also all sorts of discourses that are part literally in that building. A discourse of collaboration, a discourse of conflict transformation, a discourse of peace, a discourse of moving away from killing each other. These are discourses. These are the ideas that bring the people there. And that is an assemblage. A lot of the work I did on Cyprus more recently is on memorials. Because obviously in the more traumatizing contexts of what is now latent conflict, but of the Cyprus problem, it has been going on for decades. One of the consequences is that trauma has been translated in a whole set of memorials. And these memorials combine materials and discourses. Maybe not as peace committed as my first example. In many cases, these are memorials that are driven by what I would call antagonistic nationalism, defining the other as your enemy on the basis of nationalist self-definitions. But these memorials, and I'll give you one example, these memorials are assemblages. They combine a whole set of materials. I always call this the most ugly memorial on Cyprus. I'm sorry for that, and I don't want to insult the sculptor because it looks like a bloody turtle. I mean, it's a combination of a refugee tent and a church. But it really looks like a turtle sticking its neck out. If you start thinking about this, and I actually talked to the architect, designer, artist, Pambos, he explains that this is a combination of a refugee tent and a church. The refugee tent is referring to the fact that that village, because this is a village called Dasaki Akhna, that village was forced out of their original homes. And they were displaced after the Turkish invasion of 1974. They lived in tents for years in that location. And eventually they built a new village, which is called Dasaki Akhna, the new Akhna. And to deal with that very traumatizing experience, this is on the inside of being displaced, of losing your home, it becomes materially translated, but always discursified through the logics of discourses of trauma, loss, suffering. And I don't know how well you have any experience with the idea of displacement, but it literally cuts you into pieces. And that is what is symbolized here. It does segment you, fragment you. It removes you from your ancestry, right? And that is what Pambos in the inside of the turtle is trying to communicate. This is another example of this kind of assemblage. You have to look carefully at the picture because there are a few layers there. But what you see at the front is an artwork which is called a memorial, which is called the resolution. And the resolution is a text that is quoting the Human Rights Declaration. This particular location is right in front of the Ledra Street crossing, which is the main crossing in the capital between north and south. It's right in front of a checkpoint where Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot police would actually check your passports if you want to move into the other area. The resolution refers to human rights, refers to conflict transformation, but the interesting thing is that the actual text is only in Greek, which then begs for the interpretation. Is our artist suggesting that human rights are only protected by the Greek Cypriot community and abandoned by the Turkish Cypriot community? When we interviewed that artist, he said, well, there actually used to be a translation in Turkish, but that was removed from the assemblage. If you look really carefully, and this is why I needed to move, this is the place where a translation into Turkish used to be. And somebody vandalized it, changing the meaning of the entire assemblage, turning it into a Greek nationalist assemblage, and not in an assemblage that was committed to collaboration, to conflict transformation. And that's how assemblages can change, even through very small interventions. The photos you saw are part of a series of exhibitions that I used to analyze the Cyprus problem and its memorializations. These exhibitions are assemblages themselves, reconfigured, right? Placed in different artistic settings, allowing us to think about how the North and the South are both memorializing conflict in actually very similar ways. That is done in an extremely material way, because the stands that I could design myself, luckily for me, the stands are always there to combine photographs from the North with photographs of the South to show similarities. And again, this is where materiality kicks in, but always discursified, surrounded by different discourses. And my last quick example, one of the recent case studies with Potocký was on European identity and looking at a 4-episode television broadcast on the borders of Turkey. And what that, it's a broadcast, it's a signifying practice in itself. But what that broadcast was representing was Europe as on the one side being extremely benevolent, trying to help refugees, but also Europe as trying to stop them from entering through a border assemblage. So this television series was actually offering a representation of the border assemblage, the technologies, the bodies, but also the discourses of we are full to protect European borders. A few examples from my side. Let me go to the last short part. What about the digital now? I've talked about the discursive and the material. What about the digital? How does this feature into my narrative? Well, maybe I should keep things simple. It's part of the assemblage. Not an assemblage as such only. It's part of a broader assemblage. One way of capturing that complexity is to use the concept of the post-digital that, for instance, Kramer, Ludovico have been developing in the 2010s period. The post-digital is a way to think about the importance of the analog. And it all started with sometimes very nostalgic arguments about the importance of vinyl, moving away from digital files and actually celebrating the analog capturing of sound on LPs, right, on vinyl. And that nostalgia was translated in a theoretical reflection which moved us beyond nostalgia. Because what post-digital tries to do is to argue there's not just the digital. There are many other processes that are related to media, for instance, old and new media, digital and material components, and do pay attention to the fact that I'm not using dichotomies here for a reason. These media can be capitalist, it can be alternative, and if you start thinking, and that's the example at the very bottom, if you start thinking about print culture, you would argue that there are still quite important segments, for instance, in the world of zines, that are celebrating traditional printing technologies that are not purely online, that actually want to use digital printing technologies to create something that is unique and that is different from what is now defined as the online mainstream of magazines. And that creative use of, for instance, zines is one of the many examples of the post-digital, showing the complexity, the mixture of all these different components, assemblages in their own right, but also part of larger assemblages. And allow me to conclude and try to wrap up. This is an argument not to get stuck into what is called the material turn in media studies. More and more we see that media studies have become extremely interested in the materiality of the digital. But I would argue from a discursive material not perspective that we need to protect that balance, that we need to start thinking about both the discursive and the material as being part of these assemblages of the digital and structuring the assemblages in which the digital resides. We need to work with non-hierarchical approaches towards the discursive and the material to better understand the entanglement of these two components as we can find it in the digital. And of course, I'm not arguing that the digital is as any other sphere because, and to take Bourdieu's idea of field for a second, of course the field of the digital is always specific, but it is always contingent at the same time. It changes. It is not ultimately stable, and it is not our ultimate reality. And that brings me back to my very starting point, where, for instance, Marek Deuze has been arguing for the digital as the new real. I would argue that if you take discursive material, not perspective, on the digital, we have to acknowledge for that diversity, for that contingency, but also for the embeddedness of the digital as an assemblage in a larger assemblage in the combination of the different fields of the social, where the digital is one of the many components, and that is my last sentence, one of the many components of the social, always object of political struggle over the definition of the entanglement of the discursive and material elements. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you very much because we have a little bit time. Maybe I could open discussion, but before open discussion, I would like to thank all the people which are here, and also I see in the audience Professor Zik, which is a very famous sociologist of the Czech Republic. Thank you, Professor Zik, you are here. And also among the sociologists, I see also another Italian sociologist, Cleto Corposanto, which is here. There, hello, Cleto. Cleto will also lead one of the, will be also one of the leaders of one of these of our groups in the afternoon. Yeah, thank you, Nico, because sometimes it's a little bit like Giddens said before, the specificity of the contemporary of the contingency of the digital. And also I'm happy that I provoked my boss before when I touched him. He was really very surprised when I touched him to consider his materiality because we are in a very special period. But because I'm speaking too much, are there for you some question for Nico or some clarifications? Even of course from you that you are online, you can show your small hand as traditional. Yes, Professor Ardeo. Just a moment, I will give you the microphone.
Professor Carpentier, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I don't have a question. I'm asking for a suggestion. I'm starting to study, video game and game studies, and I was about to. I would like to explore the phenomenon that it's called in video game retro gaming, when you play old video games, because I'm a big fan of it. I'm just asking you if you can help me with some theoretical framework or some suggestion from a theoretical point of view, because what I found, at least I'm talking about Italy, in game studies we have a lack of media study and game study in Italy has not mixed yet. So I need we need something to, because it's I'm a methodologist, so I'm merely doing empirical work. But I'm longing for some, theoretical robustness to what I'm doing. And what of the research stream I would like to develop is this one about retro gaming, and I'm just asking for your suggestion from a theoretical perspective. Thank you very much.
Cool. With these kinds of suggestions or requests, one needs to be extremely careful because I don't want you to do what I would like to do, but I can tell you what I would like to do. But there's always a disclaimer in that sense. What I find fascinating in the sort of retro gaming is indeed the discursive struggle between the different positions, where a lot of the gaming is seen as part of a capitalist industry. Embedded, again, I won't go into discursive material entanglements too often here, but embedded, of course, in a whole series of discourses about professionalism, but also about sophistication, right? Where the game is almost supposed to be a perfect rendering of the real. To be realistic, I think, is the language that you would often find when you talk to gamers. They want to have an authentic, realistic experience. The world that they are looking at needs to be real for them. And what retro gaming is doing is actually engaging through a material practice in a counter-hegemonic move, undermining that professional capitalist production environment, because often there are smaller companies and often there are sort of very different kind of production context, but they're also producing a different kind of expectation, what we see on screen, as not perfect, as actually being very edgy, like not functioning really well, and with glimpses and all sorts of visual problems, moving away from the perfect representation, the mimetic representation that mainstream games are trying to impose on us. And I think that, for me, that is part of a struggle between what kind of representation do we want to have on our screens, and who is entitled to produce that representation for us. Does that have to be the huge industrial components of mainstream game production, or can that be like amateurs, to use that word in the meaning that Said gave to it, as people that love to do what they do, and not necessarily a capitalist logic. So I would look at it from this discursive material struggle. But that would be me, right? So be careful with these. This is what I would like to do, because then you'll end up going on this trajectory which might not work for you. But that would be my suggestion. But thank you for the invitation.
Thank you both. I just thinking that one of my students, they are here at the reception. I was trying to involve her in game studies. You say, "Oh, you're crazy! You are game studies." I was working in a company, preparing games. And I had this job because it's crazy what we were doing for all of them. And you want to study that? Yes, we have to study that, of course. And so I engaged there for our project. But because it's always our problem, or the problem of sociologists, or that we make analysis, but sometimes we are not there. We are not the question that we studied the fabric, the factories, and we were never workers in the factory. So that's a very old tradition, Italian operism. We have time just for another question, maybe. Just 1 minute, if there is another question.
Otherwise, it would be early lunch, which is also very attractive.
Yes, Professor Corposanto, please.
Thank you. Just a quick question, because time is not enough, maybe. The problem is, in your opinion, which part of this new virtual materialism is due to the real necessary new theories of the society, and which part is we can in some sense consider as merely economic. So this is a big question in my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we just have to cancel lunch now. I'll just do another 1 hour talk because it's a huge question. Behind also what I am talking about, maybe from a more communication and media studies perspective, is the conflict between political economy and culture studies. I didn't talk too much about that, but that conflict, that confrontation that has been structuring communication studies for a long time, and that is of course with me, it may be a bit more in the background. So what you, for me, this is an invitation to bring that a bit closer and to make that a bit more visible. And I think that if we talk about the online world, and if I go back a bit in time, we were quite utopian in believing that we would protect the online from capitalist forces. If you go back into the history, and that's 10, 20, maybe 30 years, if you're being a bit stretching it, we really believed that we could create a third space, a space outside of capitalism where democracy, where fluidity of identities could play its role. And maybe we were a bit naive, and maybe we lost. And I think that is my rather pessimistic conclusion. We lost to the strength of market forces that incorporated the online. So yes, the economic is absolutely vital in understanding the contemporary online manifestations, both in production facilities, ownership structures, and user practices, because we all became integrated into this logics of Facebook, Meta, as we now have to call it, and the consorts. The fact that we are all fascinated by a person called Musk is maybe also quite telling there. The fascination for the entrepreneur is, I think, fascinating and raises all sorts of critical questions about contemporary culture. I would still argue that also that is discursive, right? How we prioritize, how we choose, the idea that we like to be together on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, the fact that we like this togetherness is also a discursive component. So I'm not seeing this as a contradiction. The economy is all also about the discursive. Money is symbolic, right? It is the key definition of what money actually, what a currency actually is. So we do find that integration there, but I think that economic forces, and in a way, it's a very Habermasian analysis, right? We find the incorporation of the life world into the system, and we have witnessed that. I don't want to be too pessimistic. For one reason is that I don't want to spoil all of our lunch, but also there are still enclaves of resistance against these forces of incorporation into capitalist industries. And the retro gaming example was actually one of them. It's not the only one. I like Hakim Bey's work on temporary autonomous zones very much because it's a very hopeful theory. It's a theory that there will always, in these very hegemonic, very heavy, dominated contexts, there will always be little pockets of resistance. They might not survive for long. They might be destroyed, but there will always be other ones. And I find that extremely hopeful. And I think from a sociological perspective, I think we need to pay attention to them and not get totally bogged down into the analysis of the domination of market forces in the online, which is, I think, still correct as an analysis as well. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again. Now I understand why Nico Carpentier is the coordinator of maybe the best mailing list in the world for spread of such initiative like the Today initiative, because the mailing list belong to a period of history of internet when the people they thought social. If I can say where in conclusion, please. Don't use with us, especially young people, the term social media when you speak about Facebook, about it. They are a social media, really a social media. That's why now I understand why using this very old system. He's young, he's quite young, but this newsletter belong to a generation people. They are over 70 now. They really believe in these newsletters, and you also, because maybe he doesn't want to use. Social systems. Thank you very much again. And now really we have a lunch. Or because many of you they don't want to eat. I know many reasons. There is a nice park here, because if you finish the lunch quite quick, there is a nice park just around on the right of the corner to have a walk. And we will see here again at 2 o'clock. And it's still virtual room number 1 for everybody. So until just a moment, until 5 o'clock. And 5 o'clock we will divide in different rooms. But until from 2 to 5 we will be here. Professor Ardeo will be the chair, and so I will be glad to see you again. Now have your break. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much again.